everyone. My name is Otisa Eads, and I'm so excited. I'm doing this cool series where I get to talk to my colleagues and dear friends about various topics, whether it's relating to current events, different topics from a consulting standpoint, or just sharing some cool tips and things that you could utilize in the workplace, in your personal lives, things that could be supportive to you and your growth. Today, I'm so excited to have my dear friend and colleague and also do a lot of work together, facilitation, all kinds of cool things. Her name is Jenny Medrano, and I am so excited to have her here. Jenny, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, so happy to be here with you, Otissa, my bestie and colleague and dynamic duo friend. What's to say about me? I have been running my business, Jenny Medrano Coaching, since 2021, and there's been a lot of changes and pivots since then. The one thing that's been consistent is that I am focused on liberation work. So, helping, what does that look like collectively? Working with organizations, doing equity and inclusion training, consulting, conflict mediation, restorative justice. And then on the one-on-one side, doing a lot of coaching with women, especially and women of color, helping them vision for their lives and just figure out what does liberation look like for me and my community and how do I make that happen?
It's been great working with you, Jenny. You were my business coach in the very, very beginning of starting Otisa Eads LLC. We've been the dynamic duo working on retreats and workshops and doing different lives. And I feel like it's been wonderful that we've been working together for so long in different capacities. I think for me, I love watching you facilitate and watching you support your clients through coaching. It's been wonderful just seeing your growth and watching how you support your clients. So I'm just so excited that you're here today. And
Thank you.
yeah, and I know we talk a lot about different things, whether it's work related or just things that we're noticing in our communities. And today we were wanting to kind of talk a little bit more about what it's like. We are projectors for our human design friends, and my colleagues know I bring up human design a lot. We're both projectors, and so we get to use a lot of those gifts in our work, especially when it comes to strategy, coaching, and those sort of things. And I was telling Jenny a few weeks ago how I feel like on one hand, one foot is in the present, in the now, with everything that's happening with the administration and different things that we're seeing in our communities that are being impacted. And on the other hand, there's a foot in the future where we're seeing where things could be, could look like. And that could be on one hand challenging, but also I see some gratitude in having that sort of visioning gift. So, Jenny, curious in what you think, if I captured that correctly, and things that you want to share on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, we were sending voice notes to each other, and I remember hearing you articulate that, and it felt so affirming because I feel that all the time too. And I think you said something along the lines of, it's like I'm living like it's already happening, like we're already in that future. And I think we have similar ideas of what a liberated future could look like. I think for me, some of those things involve systems, healthcare, government, education, corporations that sell all the goods, all those things crumbling and shifting, very much leaving an open space for new ways to do those things. And my hope is that they are more indigenous in nature and that we have more indigenous leadership within the US. But it doesn't seem like it's going to happen even in like 3 years, like it's going to take a while. And it's weird to kind of feel like anxious about it and eager for it, but to feel all of the stress and oppression of the here and now today in the US.
Totally agree. And I feel like watching these shifts happen, I also feel like, I'm not sure if you feel the same way, that the emphasis on community, like I was reading something about how it's becoming a buzzword, which is awkward. But I also feel like at the same time, I know I've posted on my platform that community is going to look differently. It's going to require more action. It's going to require showing up in a different way. It might even be more simple as far as checking in on your close friends, neighbors, and family a little bit more often, seeing how you can support them with the things that they need, and also reminding each other that we are in this together as the administration continues to do things that impact us and impact those more quickly. And what does that require of us to do? On one hand, I definitely agree with you. I definitely see this future of community really being lived out and being spearheaded by Indigenous folks as well as BIPOC folks, and what that could look like from a structured and systematic way. But I also think that it's time for us to actually practice that. I've been talking about resistance and what that looks like, instead of it being, some folks may not be able to physically go out and protest or physically go and be at the Capitol or whatever. Like they may not be able to do those specific things, but it could be turning your phone off and spending some time in nature with your friends. That's a form of resistance. That's a form
Mhm.
of community. It doesn't need to be these huge things. It could be donating extra items to your local food bank. I've had to share those moments with my buddies and with my colleagues and friends that I think we put this extra pressure on ourselves to show up in a specific way that we see online or that we see people do, that we need to do the same thing. And I think for us to reach this future that is more communal, that cares more about the collective, we have to practice those things now. And so I feel like
Totally.
that's what I have been noticing. Like I think you and I talked about what solidarity looks like when we talk about community and community building. And I think that that's where the focus could be now in the present as we think about the future that we want to co-create together.
Yeah, and something that I always preach about, I feel like when I'm talking about white supremacy culture and how it lives in it inside of all of us in the US, it's in the air we breathe and the water we drink. It's up to each of us to decolonize our minds and to live out the other way. And one of the things we are in attention around is individualism and collectivism. And the rugged individualism of the US American ways, it was set up to keep us isolated, to keep us weak, to create these nuclear households so that we can't overpower the government if we choose to. And so patriarchy lives and all these things, right? So I think that what I'm hearing too, and I laughed when you said community is becoming a buzzword because it's annoying. It's annoying as things become buzzwords because they also kind of feel like band-aids to hard conversations. So it's like, well, what do we do? What do we do in these times with like people being detained and people being deported? Community. Like what do we mean? Are we talking about resource sharing? Are we talking about knocking on your neighbor's door and being like, hey, are you still there? Like, are we talking about like putting nails in the cars of people who are doing these things? So I always want to challenge people to get specific and not just throw a term out there. And I think that was a whole nother rant, but part of why DEI became so problematic because it just became a buzzword. If people really seriously are starting to understand the power of community and collectivism, it's the mind shift needs to turn from what do I need to do to what do we need to do, but all the time, not just at panels when we're saying, what do we need to do about the environment? No, like today I drank water. Like, is there enough water for the other people I live with? It's a whole transformation of how we think about everyday life.
Completely agree. I mean, for me, a lot of these things are small. Like they could be small things. Like you talked about knocking on your neighbor's door. Do you know your neighbor? Like, do you actually know your neighbor? If you're in a co-working space, do you know the folks that are there? Do you all do like clothing swaps like mine does? They do clothing swaps and plant swaps and different things of that nature instead of buying and consuming more things. Being intentional about, how you show up for the folks that you claim are your community. I love that you said that. And then something that I wanted to ask you is a friend of mine was telling me how they were wondering like what are ways folks can get involved, especially those that claim to be allies that are white bodied. What does that look like during this time and showing up and being and living out community? What's your opinion on that? And what would you tell someone that's like, I want to be involved, I want to support my community or be part of a community, and there's so much going on. What can I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to hear your thoughts on it too. Are you saying this person is asking like in general in Trump's America, or are they asking about a specific issue going on?
Yeah, I would think in Trump's America, that's what they're asking. And then also, I think that some folks like feel like they need to go take an existing group that has nothing to do with like social movement and be like, we're now going to do social movement work. When in reality, that may not be the solution.
It's like they're kind of in the overwhelm of like, how do we get this far? And like, I feel like, especially for white people right now, for US European white people in this administration, it can seem that you are the lucky ones and that you are going to be pretty much relatively unbothered for the next 4 years. And let's say we get a new president after that, and it's someone that's not Trump and not Republican. I think that's the first major concern I hear. I want to challenge that. Like, you are not necessarily going to be safe as a white person because of the color of your skin when like, I'm not a historian of fascism, right? But I do know that fascism, chaos creates space for more chaos, right? So if I could be kidnapped off the street based on how I look, you could be kidnapped off the street if you make someone mad or if you post something weird. What I feel like I would hope we move into, talking about 1 foot in the now and 1 foot in the future, let's say 10 years from now even, is like, I don't want any more allyship. This is my cause too. When we talk about police brutality and like how it affects Black and brown people, like that's my cause alongside you. When we talk about issues that are happening with how transgender women are being treated, like that's my cause too. And I'm not transgender, but that's my cause because we're all one and we're all connected. So I hope that that energy grows, and like someone like this ally you're talking about can shift from feeling like I'm an ally to like, oh my God, like to my left and my right, that's my brother and my sister. And if they fall, I fall. So how do I imagine this as if it's my own family or my own children that are on the line? Like what level would you take to step in, to fight, to fund?
I think that's spot on, and I like that you said that it's not just allyship. It's my cause, it's their cause, it's our cause. We care about these things. We care about education. We care about healthcare. We care about all of these things as individuals. So that means it's our fight. I love that you said that, and I think for me, you might giggle because you know me very well, but I think for me it starts small because those small things are ripples. So even if someone were to say, "Hey, I want to be involved," and I don't know where to start, literally look up food banks, look at volunteer opportunities, look at nonprofits in your area, look at urban gardens. Look, there's so many different things that are in your community. Or if you happen to be in a rural area, okay, what's the county over, or what's the city that's closest that requires you to show up and support? Volunteer at libraries and reading to children. Like there's so many things I could list that folks can get involved in their local communities and see what those needs are and begin to hopefully bridge that gap as much as possible, even if it's just showing up. And I think that would be helpful. And learning and hearing stories, right? Like there's so much that goes into that. I know for me, I've had different experiences in my life where I just got to listen and witness and hear stories, especially from migrant workers. Growing up in Kentucky, I got to spend time with migrant workers and learn more about their experiences. And so right now, my heart is hurting in a very different way as I'm seeing what's unfolding. And so I just think that folks really overcomplicate community, overcomplicate social movement and activism. And it doesn't have to be huge, it could actually be small things. Heck, your friend's having surgery next week. Maybe you go over and check on them. Like it could be very simple. It might not seem like it's moving the needle forward, but it actually is. You have friends that have children, maybe going over and saying, "Hey, I'm going to entertain the kids while you get some rest." That's a form of being in community because you're not being isolated and focusing on yourself. I want to just remind folks of the small ways that they can show up and be part of something bigger than themselves. It doesn't have to be huge grand gestures. Another question I wanted to ask you is
Could
to
I
kind
share
of
two
shoot.
thoughts
Oh yeah, go
on what
ahead.
you just said? But please, like, I want you to remember the question too, because you have good ones. Okay, one of them, we've done consulting and coaching together too. So I feel like at times we do the good cop, bad cop thing. And I feel a little bit of bad cop coming out in terms of when people ask you, what do I do? What do I do? What should I do? You are so good at giving practical examples. And maybe like today happens to be a day where we feel more capacity, or you feel more capacity to kind of brainstorm in real time and tell people what they could do. All fabulous ideas. And I 100% agree that the small actions matter just as much as the large ones. And I think the more privilege you have in your identities of race, gender, sexual orientation, citizenship status, ability levels, the more you might veer into the arena of learned helplessness because you're used to other people servicing you and kind of appealing to you and trying to keep you comfortable, especially if you're a white woman or a white man. I think I'm just hitting a point of frustration with that one. And I know that I've heard the same thing from other people in different struggles. But for me specifically, when it comes to the detainment of people, kidnapping, detention of immigrants, and especially the racial profiling of anybody looking slightly Latino, I want to challenge people on like, how would they handle this if it was their own family? For me and my family, even if we can't communicate that strongly, we'll sit around the living room and figure out like, well, this situation sucks, but everybody add their 2 cents. We need to figure out how we do this together. And it shouldn't just be on one person to figure out everything when it comes to a family conflict. If someone comes from the outside and says, well, how can I help? How can I help? That's probably like a neighbor or like someone that's not part of the family until they say, well, I want to sit on the couch and I will look up this, this, and this, and I will find this, this, and this, then they're not really seeing themselves as part of the family. So I guess I just want to invite people to challenge themselves on their expectation that someone's going to give them a to-do list and think through their own to-do list, as so many things happen at once. So many oppressive forces work together at once. And then the other thing was just when it comes to migrant workers and what you brought up, I love that you were able to have these conversations and like get to know people. And I wish there were more bridges for that. And there was real quick, there was an experiment or experience that senators were invited to go work on the farms for a day. Did you see that? And it was Cory Booker and Alex, damn, I forgot his name. One other guy, Latino guy, that signed up. And I think it was Cory Booker talking to one of the migrant workers. And he was like, man, I only did 5 of these bunches in an hour. And that same hour, this other worker did like 100 or something wild. And he was like, well, how did you do that? Like, how long have you been doing this? And then the person was like, well, I'm 70 years old. Look, I've been working on the fields for 30 years or something. So I guess the last thing I want to say is if we see a slowdown in production, if we see a slowdown in groceries, if you don't get the tomatoes you want, this is literally because we turned the other way when people were kidnapped from the farms that they are the experts in. And it's just something that I wanted to highlight.
Happy you highlighted all of those things, and I totally agree with you. And I think there is that, I love that you talked about that learned helplessness. I also feel like there's, and we've talked about this with our work, that there's this sense of needing a checklist or this sense of needing a breakdown of what to do instead of figuring that out and being part of those conversations and seeking those discussions, especially if they make you uncomfortable, because that's how else are you supposed to learn and grow and be part of something that's bigger than yourself. So I'm so happy you brought those things up. But I want to shift gears a little bit and I want to talk about the work environment and workplaces, because that's something that I have been thinking about a lot with everything happening with this administration. I find it interesting how folks are acting as if and still doing the same routine. And yes, I get it. We all have bills to pay, we have jobs we have to do. Like, I understand that logically, but I find it interesting how folks aren't realizing that what's happening with our government is going to impact us and going to impact our work environments. And are we prepared? Are we having these discussions? So I'm curious in what your thoughts are on that.
I want to hear your thoughts because I feel like you've thought about it a lot. And I haven't been in too many corporate work environments or even nonprofit work environments in a minute. I was doing this part-time office job for a couple months, and I noticed what you're pointing out, which is an absolute categorization of like what's happening in the world is out there. What's happening in the business is in here. And we do not talk about what's happening out there. And to me, it made me feel like I wanted to throw up every day. It felt fake. It felt like a ticking time bomb, honestly. Like, I do feel like there's going to be sometimes, even though people don't have maybe the tools to talk about systemic oppression and politics as we do, the frustration is still there and it's in their bodies. And somatically, they're in for all types of conflict. So that's the 2 cents I'll share, but would love to hear what you think.
I'll do two things. I'll talk about like what I'm seeing with work and nonprofits versus what I'm seeing with like small businesses and corporate companies. I feel like nonprofits, I feel like on one hand, they don't want to have fear be the driving force of things. So there's this need for stability and security, but also keeping a pulse on what's happening politically and how that's going to impact their work or impact their communities that they serve through the work that they do as a nonprofit. And then on the other hand, as someone that observes or talks to folks that are in those work environments, it's very much what you're saying is like what's happening in the outside world is happening in the outside world, but we have to focus on what we're doing in here. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think that I just find this interesting because with my nonprofit clients, I'm always reminding them of try to make sure you have time and space for your team to talk through these frustrations, especially if the work that you are doing and the communities that you're serving are being impacted directly by what the Trump administration is doing with different orders and different things. Because that's the only way you're going to get through it is by acknowledging what is happening happening? And also, how is the team being supported with this? Are there spaces for having these discussions and conversations, whether it's in a meeting or one on one or whatever? How is that being held? How is that space being held and fostered? Because it's just going to be needed, I think, a whole lot more. And then on the other hand, I feel like our small businesses and our corporate companies, I feel like there's this concern if we acknowledge what's happening, then this will impact sales, productivity, da 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 da. I would say it's already being impacted. So let's not ignore it. This may sound strange. This is the time to really pour in and support your team because you have no idea what's going on at home for them. You have no idea what fears they have, not just about, their job being impacted or whatever, but just living in the bodies that they live in, navigating what's happening for them or their families. And so I feel like this is a time to really look at like, how are we supporting our team? How are we making sure that they have what they need? To me, really important. What does your PTO look like? What does like taking time to support their mental health look like? How is that being embedded in the work culture? Like that's something that I'm really curious about because we think about the pandemic and how that was specific to like the work environment, but I think this is another version. It's just not as in our face like the pandemic was. So that's kind of like I could keep going, but that's like what I am seeing. And I think leaders, CEOs, executives need to get really clear on how they are going to show up and support their staff and team during this time of uncertainty. And where is their flexibility for folks to take care of themselves and their health while acknowledging what impact they could be facing due to the administration. So it's a lot, but I feel like that's where people need to be and not run and put their head in the sand, but just kind of have a clear view of like, this is the challenges we're going to be facing and how are we going to do this together.
You said so many gems. And the one that you just said, I was like, oh my God, I got to repeat that. Just went through my head. Like my brain's moving too fast, but hold on. Okay. You said something along the lines of your team matters the most right now. And it's really like critical. And also what you said about the pandemic. It's so true. It's a different pandemic of sorts. And we could learn because 2018, that was a different world. It's wild to think back to that. And I feel like working in a nonprofit at that point, I would go to like 5 or 6 in-person meetings and then meet up with my friends for a happy hour and then like go home and work on some stuff, maybe go to the gym. Like the amount of doing was excessive. And I feel like since coming back to like regular socialization and everything, people want to go back to that. And maybe it's that rubber band effect where they're like, we can't let go of the old ways. I've even heard it, like people's work ethic isn't what it used to be. Like people need to get back to hustling again. It's like, no, we're actively fighting that way of thinking. And even to me, the 40-hour work week, like, I think it's just so much wasted time. It's not even that people work too much, but really there's a lot of wasted time in that 40-hour work week, and we could work smarter, not harder. And I think it's interesting. I think what I want organizations and companies to know, businesses in this moment, is you're only as strong as your team. As you said, if you get a team of gold, you're golden. Like I feel like as entrepreneurs, we especially know that, like who we work with and partner with. And then the other thing, the resilience you're having to practice in the outside world, some of us more than others, is directly transferable into the work world. And I think when we keep both of them separate, even if you have like a leader of a lot of privilege at the top who's not maybe struggling as much in the outside world, like you still are practicing resilience in other ways, maybe in your marriage or with your kids or with the sport that you play or with the obstacles in life you didn't think you would encounter. And so that conversation in general could be bridged, and the professional, personal distinction that we've created, I think that needs to change in the future when we talk about what does it look like moving forward, because then we can just be overall more resilient, more creative, more collaborative.
We may have to have another time to talk more about the current work culture, the paradigm shifts between the old ways of working or what work looked like, specifically productivity. I do a lot of research about productivity because I find it very interesting. You talked about the 40-hour work week, which is also shifting and changing. And on the flip side, well, nerd hat, is how the workforce, literally the hiring practices are changing and using AI. The unemployment rate, besides everything that's happening currently, in general, for Black women and BIPOC folks are going down. They're not being hired nearly as much anymore. And so you have all these different shifts, things that are happening. And I do believe I think there's so much impacting that, but I want folks to understand that there's data proving about what's happening in our work environments and the changes that they are being faced with, and they are not good. And so when you talk about the old ways of working and folks, wanting to see that, it's because that was the old way of how we functioned and how businesses functioned and what productivity looked like and how that could be measured based on results and outcomes, when we all know that that has shifted and changed over time because the work has changed over time, especially with hybrid work environments. So I'm gonna like take my nerd hat off, but like there's something there to be said, and how you said that there's this clash. And there was an article I was reading about generation clashing between the boomers and the millennials, especially when we talk about work. There's so many things that folks need to be considering as we're seeing the shifts and changes in the work environment. Also, the impact of what's happening politically in how it's going to impact people and how that shows up in the work environment. But my biggest question I want to leave everyone else is, what is your role in this change? How are you going to show up as we are navigating uncertainty together? How does it impact you personally, professionally? And what are some things that you are going to be doing as we navigate these shifts? I'm hoping folks will leave comments and share what that looks like for them. Because like you said, like we have to move from the I and we have to move to the we. And how are we showing up in that space? Jenny, thank you so much for just taking your time out of your busy day to hang out with me and talk about these things. We're going to do this again. But what would you like to share about your work, things that you have going on that you'd like to share with folks?
Well, thank you so much for just having me join you and just yap, because, we could just yap for hours and hours, and we have before. So it feels short, but we've probably talked for a good while thus far. So I appreciate that. And my style of facilitation, consulting, and coaching is very much, let's name the elephant in the room head on. I don't want to be vague about anything that I'm talking about, especially when we're talking about difficult, sensitive topics of systemic oppression, your privileged identities, your oppressed identities, trauma. So I'll say I am hoping to work with and align with my next group of coaching clients that really feel like they might be stuck in their career, or especially with what you just said, of feeling like I can't get hired anywhere as a Black or brown woman. What do I do? I've always thought to start a business. I keep hearing that same story. Like, how do I even get started? So I'd love to work with women in that boat. And then also nonprofits and organizations that are dealing with conflicts, because I think that that is one thing that is in abundance right now from what I'm witnessing. Conflicts can be scary, they can be fragile, they can be very difficult to navigate with the power dynamics that are inherent in having a hierarchical structure. So if you need an outside mediator or facilitator of a restorative justice session or mediation between staff members, I can help you out. JennyMedranoCoaching.com.
We'll be sure to tag you on all social media platforms so folks can find out more about you and what you do, Jenny. Again, I'm Otisa. I'm a consultant, I'm a strategist, a facilitator, and a whole lot more. Please keep following me and also sign up for my newsletter. I'm going to be sharing more things I have going on, maybe some cohorts. There's a lot of things I'll be releasing soon, so I'm excited to share that with you, as well as templates, downloadables, all kinds of things. So till next time, the change you want to see in the world. Talk to you soon. Bye.